Before we begin, drop a comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching. Whether it's sunrise in Nairobi, midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to know. Don't just sit back. Tell me where in the world you are. Now let's dive into the story. My name is Margaret Holloway, and the night everything began, I was standing in my own kitchen, holding a bowl of mashed potatoes I'd already forgotten I'd made. The table was set for 5, my children, their spouses, and me. The roast had cooled, the candles had melted to crooked wax rivers, and the clock above the sink ticked louder than my own heartbeat. I'd mixed up the time again. They were all there, sitting at the table, waiting. I could feel their eyes on me. Pity, annoyance, that quiet disgust people get when they think you're slipping. "Mom," my daughter Clara sighed. "We've already eaten." Laughter followed, soft at first, then sharper. They thought it was harmless teasing. But I could see it, the flicker of mockery in their faces. They thought my mind was going. And maybe it was. Maybe that's what I wanted them to think. When I dropped the bowl, the sound shattered through the dining room like a gunshot. Mashed potatoes splattered across the hardwood, gravy pooling around my shoes. My son David whispered, "Jesus, Mom," and rose to clean it up, but I stopped him. My hands trembled, though not from weakness. From anger. From fear. From what I knew that they didn't. I looked at them, my family, the people I'd carried, fed, protected, and for the first time they looked like strangers. "It's all right," I said softly, forcing a smile. "I'll remember better next time." But the truth was, I remembered everything. I remembered what I'd seen last summer in the backyard. The late-night whispers. The buried box behind the shed. My mind wasn't fading. I was pretending. Clara came over, her perfume sharp and floral, the kind that masks guilt with sweetness. "Mom, you really need to see Dr. Klein," she said. "This isn't normal." I nodded, but her concern felt rehearsed. My children had been circling me lately, checking my pill bottles, rearranging my mail, hinting about my condition. They said it was for my safety. But I'd noticed the real reason in David's eyes. The greed, the calculation. I wasn't losing my memory, I was losing control. The house, the insurance, my savings, they were circling my life like vultures, pretending to love me. And so, I gave them what they wanted. I began to forget things on purpose. The oven left on. The phone off the hook. My keys in the freezer. Each mistake, each little senior moment, made them underestimate me more. That was the plan. The night stretched on, heavy with unspoken words. I excused myself to the living room and sank into my old floral armchair, the one with the tear in the fabric my late husband used to tease me about. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish and rain seeping through the open window. Outside, the streetlights hummed, flickering over the driveway where a black sedan idled too long before driving away. I noticed it because I always notice what others don't. When you've lived long enough, you learn that evil doesn't always knock. Sometimes it just parks across the street. I watched the headlights fade and whispered, "I know what you're waiting for." My reflection in the window looked back at me, older, yes, but not broken. I smiled because the game had already begun. They thought they were watching me unravel. But I was watching them too. Later that night, after they left, I walked into the backyard barefoot. The grass was wet, cold against my feet. The moon hung low, catching the edge of the old oak tree where the wind chimes clinked like faint warnings. I stood over the patch of earth near the shed, the one they thought I'd forgotten about. My hand shook as I traced the dirt with my fingers. The secret was still buried there, exactly where I'd left it. A flash of memory flickered, the scream, the shovel, the night it all went wrong. I closed my eyes, whispered a name I hadn't said in years, and let the chill settle deep into my bones. "They think I'm losing my mind," I said aloud to no one. "Good. Let them." Because the truth was, my memory loss wasn't an illness. It was a weapon. And soon they'd find out what I'd been hiding all along. It started that summer, the one everyone thought I'd forgotten. The air in Willow Creek, Illinois, hung heavy with heat and the sound of cicadas whining in the trees. My husband, Thomas, had already been gone 3 years, and the house felt too large for one person's memories. I remember Clara visiting often then, not out of love but curiosity, checking the cabinets, asking if I'd paid the power bill. David came less, but when he did, he always left with something missing. A watch, a silver spoon, a bottle of scotch. I didn't say a word. A woman learns when to hold her tongue. That was the summer I first saw the light behind the shed at midnight. Faint. Flickering. Not from any lamp I owned. I thought I was dreaming until I heard the whisper, low, urgent, and male. Someone was back there. And that's when the forgetting began. The next morning I told myself it was imagination. At my age, sometimes shadows play tricks. But when I walked to the shed, the soil was freshly turned. The spade leaned against the wall, mud caked at its edge. I asked David about it when he stopped by that afternoon, but his answer came too quick, too rehearsed. Just helping with the garden, Mom. We didn't have a garden. He knew I hadn't planted anything since Thomas died. His tone made my skin crawl, gentle but false. That's when I began to test him. I asked about the shed again the next day, and he frowned, said he didn't know what I was talking about. That was when the first performance began. I smiled like a confused old woman and said, "Oh, silly me, I must have forgotten." He relaxed. I knew then I'd found my disguise. Days passed and my act grew stronger. I'd pause mid-sentence, pretend to lose words. I'd leave lights on, mix up names. Clara whispered to David that I needed help. They started calling me more often, not out of care but strategy. They thought they were getting closer to controlling me, to moving me out, selling the house and taking what was mine. I played along, even let the neighbor, sweet Mrs. Hanlon, believe I'd left the stove on 3 times that week. The more people whispered, the safer I became. Because no one suspects the confused. And while they all believed I was losing pieces of myself, I was really collecting theirs. The small lies, the late-night visits, the way Clara's husband parked 2 blocks away before coming inside. I saw everything. I remembered everything. The forgetting was just my camouflage. One afternoon I followed the sound of digging again. I stayed inside, peeking through the kitchen blinds. David was behind the shed, sweating through his shirt, dirt streaking his arms. He looked around like a guilty child before lifting something wrapped in cloth, something small but heavy. I couldn't see what it was, but when he buried it again, I noticed the shape it left in the soil, long and narrow like a jewelry box or a case. I waited until he left, then walked out there myself. The earth still warm from his hands. I knelt, pressed my fingers to the dirt and whispered, "What have you done?" For a moment, I almost dug it up right then. But something stopped me, a sound. Tires on gravel. A car. Pulling up. I turned just in time to see Clara step out, sunglasses on, lips tight. She wasn't supposed to be there. Not together. Not both of them. They argued quietly near the driveway, but I heard enough, my name, the word Will, and something about the night Thomas died. The air froze in my lungs. I knew then that whatever they'd buried wasn't new. It was old, from before my husband's death. Maybe even connected to it. My chest tightened, but I kept still, listening, memorizing their words. Then Clara saw me. "Mom, what are you doing out here?" she asked, voice sharp with panic. I smiled, held my head like I was confused, and said, "I thought I heard Thomas calling." Her face went pale. "Inside, Mom," she insisted, taking my arm. I obeyed. I always obeyed. But that night after they left, I wrote everything down in my old recipe book. Every detail, every lie, every whisper. My family thought my memory was slipping away. They didn't know it was sharper than ever. They didn't know I'd already decided to find out what they'd buried, and why. That night, the rain fell like whispers against the roof. I sat in my armchair, the recipe book open on my lap, the pages trembling with the weight of what I'd written. Each word was a secret stitched into paper. David digging. Clara lying. Something buried. My heart pounded, not from fear but from purpose. I hadn't felt that in years. Around midnight the house went still. That's when I put on my coat, slipped on Thomas's old boots and stepped outside. The air was sharp with wet earth and lightning. The shed loomed ahead, its padlock rusted but weak. I pried it open, the metal squealing like it hadn't been touched in years. Inside, the smell hit me, damp wood, old oil and something else, something metallic. I turned on my flashlight and saw the corner of the floorboard slightly raised. My breath caught. I knelt, pressed my fingers under the edge and lifted. Beneath it was dirt. Freshly disturbed, still soft. My knees ached as I dug, the soil clinging to my skin. Each scoop brought back a memory. Thomas teaching me how to garden, Clara's first birthday, David's first lie. Then my hand struck something hard. I froze. It was a box, wooden and stained dark from moisture. The latch was rusted, but when I pried it open, a smell of old paper and iron escaped. Inside there were documents, yellowed with age, bound by a rubber band. And beneath them, a small pistol, clean and oiled. My heart stuttered. Thomas had never owned a gun. I picked up the papers. The top one bore my husband's signature, dated 3 days before his death. A revised will, one that left everything to me. I flipped through, hands shaking. The next page, another version, unsigned, leaving everything to David and Clara. My mind spun. Why 2 wills? Why hide them here? And who cleaned the gun? I heard thunder roll in the distance. Or maybe it wasn't thunder. Maybe it was a car. Headlights swept across the backyard. I froze, clutching the box. The beam stopped just short of the shed door. Someone was out there. I pressed the light off, held my breath, listening. The car engine hummed, then cut. Footsteps followed, slow, deliberate, splashing through puddles. A man's voice, low, tense. "David. She's awake again," he muttered to someone I couldn't see. Another voice answered, "Clarice. Then we have to move it tonight." My stomach turned cold. Move what? I stayed silent, crouched in the dark, the box cradled in my arms. The rain dripped through the cracks, tapping the wood like a warning clock. They stopped just outside. I heard the crunch of boots on gravel, the sound of keys, then Clara's voice again. "She doesn't even remember where she keeps the scissors, David. Trust me. She won't remember any of this." I bit my tongue to keep from laughing. If only she knew. My mind was clearer than ever. They left after a few minutes, the car disappearing into the fog. I waited until silence swallowed the street again before stepping out, clutching the box to my chest. My hands were muddy, my breath short. I took the papers inside and spread them on the kitchen table under the lamp's yellow light. The handwriting was unmistakable, Thomas's, but something about the signature felt off. Slanted, shaky, forced. My husband had been many things, but careless wasn't one of them. I ran my fingers over the ink, and the pen mark smudged slightly. Fresh. Too fresh for a document supposedly written years ago. My throat tightened. Someone had forged his will. Someone close. I looked at the pistol again, the serial number scratched off, the metal cold as betrayal. A sound behind me made me flinch, the floorboard creaked. I turned, but the hallway was empty. Only the sound of the grandfather clock ticking, and my own pulse in my ears. I gathered everything, the gun, the forged will, the real one, and placed them in my knitting basket beneath a layer of yarn. By morning, I'd pretend none of it existed. The next day, Clara would arrive with her forced smile and pitying tone. David would follow, pretending to fix the porch steps. I'd let them. I'd play the frail old woman again, sweet and forgetful. But inside I was planning. I needed to know what they meant by "move it tonight." What were they hiding that was so urgent, so dangerous they'd risk coming here in the rain? As I turned off the lamp and the house went dark, I whispered into the quiet. "You think I'm losing my memory. But I'm remembering everything you want buried." Outside, the wind carried the chime's hollow song through the yard. And for the first time I realized my family wasn't just mocking my mind. They were afraid of what I still knew. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window watching the streetlights flicker against the mist, the gun heavy in my lap beneath an old knitted shawl. The world outside felt like it was holding its breath. I could sense it, something was coming. Around 2 in the morning the sound reached me. Tires crunching over gravel. A car, headlights off. My chest tightened as I pulled the curtain just an inch. It was Clara's blue sedan. She stepped out first, her silhouette framed by the dim glow of the dashboard light. Then David. They whispered, their words lost to the wind, but their faces told the story. Panic, guilt, and fear. David carried a duffel bag. Clara clutched a flashlight. They moved quickly toward the shed. I felt my pulse thudding in my temples. Whatever they'd buried, tonight they were digging it up. And I would finally see what truth they were trying so desperately to hide. I slipped out the back door quietly, barefoot this time. The rain had stopped, but the grass was slick and cold beneath my feet. Every step felt like walking a tightrope between sanity and madness. The night hummed with crickets, and the smell of wet earth clung to my skin. I crept behind the lilac bushes and watched as Clara held the light while David dug. His shoulders tense, his hands trembling. The duffel bag lay open beside them. "Hurry up," Clara hissed. "We can't stay long." David grunted, shoveling deeper. Then, finally, his spade struck something solid. I leaned forward, heart pounding. He dropped to his knees, brushing away the dirt, and when I saw what he pulled from the ground, I had to cover my mouth to keep from gasping. It wasn't a box this time. It was a small wooden cross, weathered, broken, with my husband's initials carved into it. Clara whispered. "We should have burned it when we had the chance." David shook his head, voice shaking. "Too risky. If they test the soil again." My breath caught. Test the soil? My mind raced. Something was buried there, something real, something human. A memory began to claw its way back from the dark corners of my mind. The night Thomas died. The police said it was a heart attack, quick and quiet in his sleep. But I remembered a sound that night, the front door opening, muffled voices, then silence. And the next morning, the shed door was slightly open. My throat went dry. Had I forgotten? Or had I forced myself not to remember? The truth pressed against my skull like a migraine. Clara stood up suddenly. "We can't leave it here," she said. "If anyone finds out what we did." "What you did?" David cut in, his voice low, bitter. They glared at each other. I realized then they weren't allies. They were partners in guilt. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating their faces for a single instant. Clara's tear-streaked, David's pale and furious. The thunder followed like judgment. I stepped back, my heel snapping a twig beneath me. They both froze. The flashlight swung toward the bushes. "Who's there?" David barked, grabbing the shovel like a weapon. My heart thudded so loudly I thought it would give me away. I pressed a trembling hand over my mouth, praying. Clara stepped closer, her eyes scanning the shadows. "Mom," she called, voice uncertain. I didn't move. "It's nothing," David muttered. "Probably a raccoon." But I saw it, the flicker of fear in her expression, the way her gaze darted toward the house. She knew. Somehow she knew I was awake, that I'd seen too much. When they turned back to their hole, I retreated toward the porch, each step heavier than the last. Inside, I locked the door, my mind spiraling. If Thomas's death wasn't natural, then what had my children done? At dawn, the backyard was still. I stepped out again, clutching a mug of cold coffee, and saw the ground behind the shed smoothed over like nothing had happened. But there was a mark in the dirt. A single footprint, small, delicate. Clara's. I walked to the spot and pressed my palm to the soil. It was cold now, lifeless, yet I swore I could still feel the pulse of something beneath it. I whispered Thomas's name. No answer. Just the wind, rustling the leaves above me like sighs from another world. Back inside, I opened my recipe book again and wrote. They came for it. The cross. He wasn't at peace. They're hiding something worse than greed. As I set down the pen, I saw a smear of mud across the kitchen floor, footprints. Not mine. Fresh. Leading from the back door to the hallway. My hands began to shake. I wasn't alone. Someone had been inside while I watched from the window. The footprints led down the hallway, small, wet, deliberate. I followed them. Each step a test of courage I didn't know I had left. The air inside the house felt thick, like it was holding its breath with me. My eyes darted to the family photos along the wall. Thomas in his uniform, Clara and David as children, smiling with innocence that had long since died. The prints stopped at the end of the hall, right outside the door to my husband's old study. That door had been locked since the day he passed. The key hung from a string on the kitchen hook, untouched. Or so I thought. I reached out, my fingers trembling, and turned the knob. Clicked open easily. Too easily. The smell hit me immediately. Dust, old paper, and something faintly sweet, like decaying flowers. The curtains were drawn, but there was movement inside. A shadow shifting. I froze. Someone was here. "Hello." My voice barely rose above a whisper. Silence. Then a creak. And a cough. I flicked on the light, and there he was. A man slumped in Thomas's old chair, facing the window. His back to me. His clothes were damp, boots caked with mud. My throat went dry. "Who are you?" I demanded, clutching the edge of the door for balance. Slowly he turned his head. His face was gaunt, pale, eyes sunken deep into his skull. "Mrs. Holloway," he rasped. You don't remember me, do you? My heart stumbled in my chest. His voice was familiar, distant, like an echo from a memory I'd buried too deep. Should I? I managed. He smiled weakly, shaking his head. You used to call me Danny, Thomas's apprentice, the one who fixed your porch light last summer. The words struck like lightning. I did remember. A polite young man who disappeared right after Thomas's funeral. The police said he'd moved away. But now here he was sitting in my house, mud on his boots, a tremor in his hands. They shouldn't have done it, he whispered. They shouldn't have buried it. I stepped closer, pulse pounding. What do you mean buried what? His eyes flicked toward the window, fear etched across his face. They told me to keep quiet, he said. Said it was just business, that your husband wouldn't feel a thing. I didn't believe them until I saw. His voice broke. I knelt beside him. You're not making sense, Danny. Who told you this? He grabbed my wrist suddenly, his grip cold and desperate. Your son. And your daughter. They said Thomas was going to change the will back, leave everything to charity. They couldn't let that happen. The room began to spin. My children. My flesh and blood. You're lying. I whispered, but the words felt weak, hollow. He shook his head, eyes wild. I saw them. That night. They made me help. Said if I didn't, they'd pin it on me. But now they know I talked. My stomach turned to ice. Talked to who? I asked. He looked at me with glassy eyes. To you, Mrs. Holloway. To you. Before I could speak, a sound shattered the moment. A knock at the front door. Loud. Sharp. Repeated. Danny's head jerked toward it, panic flashing in his eyes. It's them, he hissed. I stood, heart hammering. Hide, I said, but he was already moving, stumbling toward the closet. I hurried to the living room, my breath shallow, my hands trembling. The knocks came again, faster now. I peered through the peephole and nearly gasped. Clara stood outside, rain in her hair, eyes wild. Mom, she called. Open up. Please, it's urgent. I hesitated, remembering the mud on my floor, the stranger in my study. It's late, Clara, I said, my voice steady but sharp. Can't it wait till morning? She banged harder. No, Mom, please. David's missing. My stomach dropped. Missing. He said he was coming here. He hasn't come home. Her voice cracked. Please just let me in. Against every instinct, I unlocked the door. Clara stumbled inside, drenched, shaking. Her eyes darted around the room, landing briefly on the study door before she quickly looked away. He came here, she said breathlessly. I know he did. His car's down the street. I stayed silent, watching her carefully. Her mascara ran in dark rivers down her cheeks. Mom, she whispered, stepping closer. If you see him, you have to tell me. I swallowed hard, forcing calm. What did you bury, Clara? The question landed like a slap. She froze, eyes wide, mouth trembling. What did you say? Behind the shed. What did you and your brother bury? Her lips parted, but no words came. Then from down the hall a sound, soft, muffled like a cough. Her head snapped toward it. What was that? She whispered. I took a step back. Probably just the house settling. But we both knew it wasn't. Because the next sound wasn't a cough. It was the creak of the study door slowly opening. The study door creaked open, the sound slicing through the still air like a blade. Clara spun toward it, her face pale as moonlight. Mom, she whispered. Is someone here? I didn't answer. My eyes stayed fixed on the dark gap widening in the doorway. Then Danny stepped out. Mud-streaked, trembling, eyes darting between us like a trapped animal. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. You, she breathed. You're supposed to be gone, he finished hoarsely. Yeah, that's what you told them to think. I watched the color drain from her face. The world seemed to tilt. Danny, what is this? I asked, my voice low, steady. Tell her, he said, pointing at Clara. Tell your mother what you made me do. Clara shook her head violently. He's lying, Mom. He's sick. But the fear in her voice betrayed her. Danny stepped closer, his voice breaking. I didn't mean to. He was alive when we left him, I swear. The room went cold. Who? I whispered, though I already knew. Clara's composure cracked. Stop it, she cried. Mom, he's confused. Thomas had a heart condition, you know that. Danny's hands trembled. He didn't die in his sleep, he said, eyes filling with tears. He found out what they were doing, changing the will, forging his signature. He threatened to call the police. They panicked. David hit him. It was supposed to just scare him, but he fell. Hit his head. My vision blurred, the room spinning. You're lying, Clara hissed. You don't know anything. He turned to her, voice breaking. I helped you bury him, Clara. You told me no one would ever find out because your mother was already forgetting things. The world stopped. My knees buckled and I grabbed the edge of the table. Clara's face twisted, tears spilling down her cheeks. He was dead already, she whispered. We didn't mean to kill him. Her voice cracked like glass. I could barely breathe. Every memory of that night, the police, the pitying looks, unraveled into horror. My children had murdered their father. I backed away, shaking, the walls closing in. You buried him, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Behind my house. Behind my garden. Clara fell to her knees, sobbing. It was David's idea, she cried. He said it would look like a robbery gone wrong. He said no one would question it if we found the body somewhere else. She broke off, choking on her words. Danny turned to me, his eyes pleading. I tried to tell you, he said softly. But then they came for me. They made me leave town. I thought it was over until last week. I swallowed hard, my voice shaking. What happened last week? His answer chilled me to the bone. David called. Said they found something near the shed. A ring. Your husband's ring. My mind flashed back to the small cross they dug up. They were moving the body, I whispered. They were trying to hide him again. The room felt smaller with every breath, every truth dragging me deeper into the dark. Clara looked up, eyes wild. Mom, please. You have to believe me. It was an accident. I stared at her, my daughter, the child I'd rocked to sleep, the girl who used to bring me daisies on Mother's Day, and felt nothing but emptiness. You let me sit at that man's grave every Sunday, I said slowly. You let me cry over an empty coffin. Her face twisted in anguish. We thought it was mercy, she whispered. You were already forgetting things. We thought it would be easier if you never knew. Danny's voice broke in, harsh and shaking. They used you, Mrs. Holloway. They used your grief to cover their tracks. I turned toward him, my hands trembling. Why tell me now? He looked at the door, eyes darting. Because David's not missing. He's running. And if he thinks I talked, he'll come back to finish what he started. A silence fell between us, heavy and electric. Outside, thunder rumbled again. The storm was returning. I closed my eyes and felt something inside me shift. Something that had been asleep for years. The weak, forgetful widow they thought they could fool was gone. I reached beneath the table and pulled out the pistol I'd found in the shed. Clara gasped. Mom, what are you doing? I didn't answer. I checked the chamber, loaded. You buried your father, I said, voice cold. You lied to me, mocked me, used me, but not anymore. Danny took a step back, eyes wide. Mrs. Holloway. Quiet, I said softly. You're going to help me end this. I looked out the window. The rain had started again, soft at first, then harder, washing over the glass like cleansing tears. Somewhere out there, David was still lurking, desperate, dangerous. And I was ready. They thought I was losing my memory, I whispered. But I've never remembered more clearly in my life. The wind howled through the cracks in the door. The storm wasn't coming. It was already here. The storm clawed against the windows, wind shrieking through the trees like something alive. The lights flickered, painting the room in short, violent flashes of white. Clara was still on her knees, sobbing, while Danny paced near the doorway, his hands shaking. I stood between them and the dark window, the pistol steady in my hands. Every instinct told me it wasn't over. Not yet. Then 3 sharp knocks. Not a frantic pounding. Calm. Deliberate. Danny froze. Clara's head snapped up, her breath caught in her throat. No, she whispered, trembling. He wouldn't. He can't be here. The knocks came again. Louder this time. Rain dripped down the glass like tears. I turned to them, my voice low. You're going to stay right here, I said. Both of you. I walked toward the door, each step echoing through the quiet house. When I opened it, the wind slammed in cold and alive. And there he was, David. My son. Soaked, pale, and smiling like a ghost who'd come home. "Evening, Mom," he said softly, water dripping from his hair. His tone was calm, too calm. I didn't move. "Where have you been?" I asked. He shrugged, stepping into the light. His clothes were torn, his knuckles raw. "Cleaning up a mess," he said. "The kind Danny made." I heard Danny suck in a sharp breath behind me. "Don't believe him, Mrs. Holloway," he stammered. "He's lying, he killed." "Shut up." David's voice cracked like thunder. He pointed at Danny, eyes burning. "You think you can crawl back here and turn her against us? After what you did?" I raised the gun slightly. "David," I said, my tone steady, "I know what happened to your father." His face twitched, that calm mask slipping for just a second. "You don't know anything," he said, voice low. "You're sick, Mom. You've been sick for years. You can't even trust your own mind." The way he said it, the rehearsed patience, the calculated pity, made my stomach twist. That was the same tone he used when he first told me Thomas had died in his sleep. Clara stood slowly, tears streaking her face. "David, please," she said. "Mom knows everything." Danny told her. David turned to her, eyes dark as the storm outside. "You talked to him?" His voice was soft but dangerous. She nodded, shaking. "I had to. We can't keep doing this." The silence that followed was unbearable. Then David smiled. It wasn't the smile of a son. It was the grin of a man who'd already made peace with his sin. "You think this ends because you confessed?" he asked. "You think she'll go to the police and they'll just believe a senile old woman?" His words sliced through the air. I lifted the gun higher. "Try me," I said. He looked at me, really looked, and for a moment I saw it, fear. Not of the gun, but of the truth. "You always said I'd never amount to anything," he said bitterly. "Maybe you were right. But I'll be damned if I let you destroy me." He lunged. The world exploded into motion. The gun went off once, loud, deafening. The flash burned the darkness white. I stumbled backward, my ears ringing. David dropped to his knees, clutching his shoulder, screaming through gritted teeth. Clara shrieked. Danny ran to grab the gun, but I held onto it with both hands, breath ragged. "Don't touch me," I yelled. "This isn't over." Blood spattered across the wood floor, mixing with rainwater that had blown in from the open door. David looked up, eyes wild. "You shot your own son," he hissed. "You're insane." I leveled the gun again, tears streaming down my cheeks. "No," I whispered. "I'm remembering." Lightning flashed again, illuminating the photographs on the wall. Smiling faces of birthdays long gone. David crawled toward the door, dragging himself through the blood. "You'll regret this," he rasped. "You'll lose everything." I took one step forward. "I already did," I said. "When you killed your father." The sirens came minutes later, their red and blue lights painting the storm in color. Clara was curled on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Danny had vanished, slipped away sometime after the shot. David lay still, bleeding but alive, his face pale and expressionless. I stood by the window, the gun resting in my hands like a memory. The rain was easing, soft now, almost peaceful. An officer stepped inside, cautious but gentle. "Ma'am," he said, "we need to take that from you." I nodded slowly, handing him the weapon. "It's done," I whispered. As they led David out on a stretcher, his eyes met mine one last time. There was no anger left. Just exhaustion. Just the hollow look of a man whose lies had finally met daylight. Clara reached for me, but I stepped back. "Don't," I said quietly. "Not tonight." When they left, I stood alone in the silence of my home, the storm fading into a steady drizzle. And for the first time in years I remembered everything. Morning came gray and trembling. The storm had passed, leaving the air damp and heavy with the scent of earth and ash. Police cars still lined the street outside, their tires sinking slightly into the muddy curb. Neighbors watched from their porches, whispering behind half-closed doors. I sat wrapped in a blanket at the edge of my porch watching them dig. Behind the garden, the place I'd planted roses every spring since Thomas died. Yellow tape fluttered like weak sunshine. The detective, a tall man with tired eyes, approached quietly. "Mrs. Holloway," he said, crouching beside me. "We found something." I didn't ask what. I already knew. His gloves were brown with soil, his voice careful. We're bringing it up now. There's jewelry, personal effects. A ring. My heart clenched. Thomas's ring. The one I'd tucked into his coffin or thought I had. Can I see it? I asked. He hesitated, then nodded to another officer. Moments later, a small evidence bag was placed in my trembling hands. Inside, caked with dirt and time, was the gold band engraved with our wedding date. I turned the ring over slowly, feeling the weight of it. June 14, 1972, I whispered. The detective nodded. It matches the engraving from the marriage certificate. His tone softened. Mrs. Holloway, I need to ask, did you ever notice anything strange around this area before today? I looked toward the roses swaying in the wind. I used to forget things, I said. Whole days would slip away. I thought I was losing myself. I paused, swallowing hard. But maybe I was remembering the wrong things. Maybe they wanted me to. He studied me, kind but wary. You're saying your children might have tampered with your medication or memory? I met his gaze. They made me doubt my own mind. Every time I asked about that night, they told me I dreamed it. Every time I mentioned hearing voices in the garden, they said it was just grief. His face darkened. We'll look into that. He rose, nodding toward the yard where the digging had stopped. We found bones, ma'am. Human remains. We'll confirm soon, but... He didn't finish. He didn't have to. I knew who they belonged to. The ambulance carrying David had long gone, its siren fading into silence. Clara sat on the porch steps, wrapped in a police blanket, staring into nothing. Her face was empty, no tears left. When I looked at her, she didn't look back. The detective turned to me again. Your son will be under custody once he's stable. The younger man, Danny, he's missing, but we've issued a warrant. I nodded, my eyes on the garden. You'll find him, I murmured. He's not brave enough to go far. The detective hesitated. Mrs. Holloway, you said last night that you remembered everything. Can you tell me exactly what you meant by that? I drew in a long, unsteady breath. I remembered the sound, I said softly. The night Thomas died. I heard a thud, something heavy, and then voices whispering. I thought it was a dream. But it wasn't. It was them. I looked down at my trembling hands. They counted on me forgetting. But sometimes the mind hides what the heart can't bear. The detective wrote something down, then closed his notebook. We'll take it from here, ma'am, he said gently. You've done enough. By evening, the house was quiet again. The flashing lights were gone, leaving only muddy footprints and the faint hum of rain gutters dripping. I wandered through the living room, touching the framed photos lining the mantel. Frozen smiles of a family that never truly existed. Thomas in his fishing hat. Clara holding a sparkler. David's graduation photo. Eyes proud and secretive. I touched the glass over his face. You could have told me, I whispered. You could have told me the truth. A soft creak behind me made me turn. Clara stood in the doorway, her voice small. They're taking David to the county jail, she said. He'll live. I nodded, not looking at her. Good. She stepped closer. Mom, I know you'll never forgive me. But please, please don't hate me forever. I turned slowly, studying her tear-streaked face. I don't hate you, I said. But I can't love you the same way anymore. She broke then, fell to her knees, sobbing into her hands. I didn't move to comfort her. Some lessons had to be carried in silence. When night finally came, I went to the garden one last time. The earth was uneven now, the roses trampled by boots and rain. The air smelled of mud and truth. I knelt by the old oak at the back of the yard and laid the ring gently on the soil. I found you, I whispered. They thought I wouldn't, but I did. Lightning flickered far off, soft and distant, like a memory fading into peace. You were always the quiet one, Thomas. Always steady, even when I wasn't. I smiled faintly, brushing dirt from my palms. Rest now. They can't hurt us anymore. Behind me, the wind rustled through the trees, gentle this time, almost kind. I turned toward the house, its windows glowing faintly in the dark. For the first time in years, I didn't feel lost inside it. I felt awake, whole. The mind they mocked, the memory they tried to bury, it had saved me. Saved the truth. As I walked back up the steps, I whispered to myself, Sometimes forgetting is mercy. But remembering is justice. 2 days passed before they let me back inside the house alone. The investigators had combed through every drawer, every floorboard, every dark corner that might hide a secret. But even as they packed up their evidence boxes and drove away, I knew they'd missed something. Because the real evidence wasn't buried in the dirt. It was buried in my own walls. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the old tape recorder on the counter. It was dusty, the same one Thomas used to dictate notes for his repair shop. When the detective had seen it, he'd said it didn't work. But Thomas always told me, never throw away a broken thing. Sometimes it's just pretending. I pressed play. The machine clicked, hissed, then came alive with static. And then a voice. My son's voice. David. We have to move him tonight, it said, low and shaky. My blood turned to ice. Another voice followed, Clara's. Mom's already forgetting. She won't even notice. The sound of shovels. The crunch of dirt. I sank into the nearest chair, shaking as my children's voices confessed everything into the quiet air. I listened again, my fingers trembling on the rewind button. Every word tore through me. David, please, Clara's voice pleaded through the tape. This isn't right. He snapped back. You think jail's better? You think I'm letting this ruin us? I covered my mouth, heart pounding. And then the faintest whisper, my husband's voice, weak but still alive. Please stop. The next sound was the blow. Then silence. I pressed stop, gasping for air. I didn't know whether to scream or collapse. I'd spent years thinking the mind had betrayed me, but it was memory that had protected me all along. For the first time I understood. My mind had hidden the truth because I wasn't ready to survive it. Now I was. I wrapped the tape in a towel and placed it carefully in my bag. The detective's words from 2 nights ago echoed in my head. You've done enough. No, I hadn't. Not yet. I was going to make them listen, make them remember just like I had. That evening I drove to the county jail. The rain had returned, softer this time, as though the sky was mourning with me. The officer at the front desk recognized me. Mrs. Holloway, he said gently. You're here for your son? I nodded, clutching the tape recorder like a relic. They led me down the narrow hallway, the air thick with disinfectant and regret. When David appeared behind the glass partition, his arm was bandaged, his face pale but defiant. Mom, he said flatly, you shouldn't be here. I placed the recorder on the counter between us. You lied, I said quietly. His jaw tightened. About what? I pressed play. The voices filled the small room. His, Clara's, and Thomas's faint groan before the end. His expression shifted from cold to terrified in seconds. Where did you get that? He hissed. Dad recorded it, I said. He knew something was wrong that night. He hid the recorder in the garage. You buried him before you realized it was still running. His face drained of color. You can't. I already did, I said. The police will have it by morning. He stared at me, his breath shallow. You destroy your own son for this? He said, voice trembling. I met his eyes through the glass. You destroyed yourself, I whispered. I'm just the one cleaning up what you buried. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw the boy he used to be flicker through his face. The one who built birdhouses with his father, who used to hold my hand crossing the street. But that boy was long gone. He leaned forward, eyes glinting with a strange mix of fear and admiration. You played dumb, he said softly. You let us think you were losing your mind. I nodded. It kept me safe, I said. You mocked my memory. But it's the only reason I'm still standing. He laughed once, hollow sharp. Guess the old woman wins after all. I picked up the recorder and stood. No, I said. There are no winners here. Only truth. And it always costs something. Then I turned and walked away as his laughter faded behind me, echoing like thunder in the hall. That night, I sat on the porch as the wind calmed and dawn broke over the Illinois suburbs. The first light touched the wet streets, the same streets that had once felt like home. I placed the tape on the railing beside me and closed my eyes. Somewhere in the distance I could hear the soft hum of life returning. Sprinklers, birds, the sound of my neighbor's dog. The world kept moving even when ours stopped. Clara had called earlier, begging forgiveness again, her voice cracking through the phone. I told her the truth. Forgiveness wasn't mine to give. It belonged to her father. And he was finally free. The detective would pick up the tape by noon. By nightfall, my children's confessions would echo through a courtroom. I exhaled deeply, feeling lighter, older, cleaner. They mocked my memory, I whispered to the dawn. But it remembered them long after they forgot me. For the first time, the ache behind my eyes eased. The past wasn't a fog anymore. It was light, and it was mine. It's strange, the silence that follows justice. You expect relief, fireworks, a sense of victory. But what comes instead is quiet. Soft like snowfall on the roof of an empty house. The news trucks left days ago. The police stopped calling. Even the neighbors have found new stories to whisper about. I sit at my kitchen table now, the morning light spilling across the wood, catching the tiny scratches Thomas made fixing the old radio years ago. The air smells of coffee and rain-soaked soil. I don't shake anymore when I pour. My hands are steady. My memory too. It's all here now, every sound, every face, every truth they tried to bury. The trial is scheduled for next month. Clara turned herself in. She came to the house one last time, left a note by the door. It said, "I loved him too." I believe her. But love is not innocence. And forgiveness is a language I'm still learning to speak. Sometimes at night I hear Thomas's voice. Not like a ghost. More like an echo that lives inside the quiet. He tells me stories I used to tell the children. About the summer they learned to swim in the lake behind our house. About how David was afraid of the dark. And how Clara used to sneak cookies into her pockets to share with him. I close my eyes and see their faces. Not the liars, not the killers, but the children they once were. And then I open my eyes, and the truth sits with me again. They grew up. They made choices. They crossed lines. Still, a part of me loves them. Maybe that's the curse of motherhood. No matter how deep the betrayal, your heart still remembers the sound of their first cry. But I've stopped letting that love blind me. Now it just reminds me who I am. And who I refuse to become. The garden's alive again. The police cleared the site and let me plant what I wanted. I chose lilies this time, white ones. Pure, stubborn, beautiful. Every morning I kneel in the dirt, press my fingers into the soil, and feel the heartbeat of the ground beneath me. People ask how I can still live here, in the house where it all happened. But this place isn't cursed. It's honest. The walls don't lie anymore. They creak when it rains, they sigh in the wind, and sometimes I swear they hum when the sun hits them just right. I think Thomas would have liked that. His grave sits under the oak tree now, for real this time. The headstone reads, "Beloved husband and father." The truth always returns. I visit every sunset. I tell him about the lilies, about the neighbors, about how remembering him no longer hurts. It heals. The town thinks of me as the woman who remembered too much. They say it like it's both a blessing and a warning. Maybe it is. Memory is a strange thing. It hides when you need it most and returns when you think you're safe. Mine saved my life, but it also broke my heart in ways I'll never repair. Sometimes I wonder if forgetting would have been kinder. But then I think of the tape, of the lies buried under my roses, of how close evil came to winning. And I know I'd rather live with pain than with blindness. Because pain means you still feel. It means you're still human. And I've learned that even broken minds can remember what matters most: love, truth, and the will to keep breathing. No matter how heavy the air becomes. Tonight I sit by the window, a cup of tea in my hand, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one. The world looks soft again. Like the kind of evening where stories are born. Maybe one day someone will tell mine. Maybe they'll say, "There was once a woman who everyone thought was losing her mind," until they realize she'd never been sharper. And maybe they'll end it with this, the lesson I wish I'd known sooner. Never mock the quiet ones. Never doubt the forgetful. Because sometimes the mind you think is slipping is the only one that remembers the truth. I take a slow sip of tea, smile to myself, and whisper into the twilight. I remember now, Thomas. All of it. And I'm not afraid anymore. The clock ticks softly. The house exhales. And the story at last can rest. And that, my dear listeners, is why you should never underestimate the memories of a grandmother. Some of us forget. But some of us remember too well.